Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk. Time for the show. Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU has been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems. And they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show the support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout. You also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk. Baby J, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
And it'll be good because I don't think we've ever had this chat before about what your background is or anything. Because you were just kind of there on the scene when I was looking around.
What you're politely trying to say is I'm significantly older than you. By the time you hit the scene, I'd already been there a decade or something.
I was a late starter. But yeah, it'd be really good to kind of start off by looking at how you first got into music, into DJing.
Yeah. Okay, so music. So I shouldn't have got into music or black music. There's no rationale for it really. So, grew up in a middle-class white family. Neither my parents especially into music, no uncle that played an instrument or was in a band or anything like that. But just kind of got exposed kind of through pirate radio and listening to bits and bobs on the, mainstream radio and whatever to black music, and just straight away just thought this is amazing and really liked it. And then kind of gravitated to a couple of mates at school that were into hip hop. When hip hop first came out, so we're talking, kind of, well, not first came out, but when probably there's first awareness over here. So it's kind of like early 80s, late 70s, that kind of period, and really kind of early Public Enemy, Eric B and Rakim, that kind of stuff, BDP, first album, all that type of stuff. So I had a couple of older friends that were listening to that, and also funk and soul, Parliament, Funkadelic, all that type of stuff. So I kind of gravitated to a couple of friends at school that were into that type of stuff, and they were a bit older than me, so they were putting me on different types of music. And there was Heatwave pirate radio in Nottingham, which you could get just about from Derby. So we used to tune into One Step Ahead show. DJ One Step Ahead was one of my first DJs that I really kind of learned a lot from. And just kind of really got into kind of black music. And basically those days there was no internet, obviously. Radio was very limited, and certainly like mainstream radio wasn't playing this sort of music. So we would kind of find out about these bands, and you'd save up your pocket money and you'd go to the record shop and you'd flick through the soul and R&B section and kind of pick by cover. So if there wasn't a band you kind of look at the cover and kind of go, that looks like the sort of thing I'd be into. Or we used to go to the Guildhall Market, and then there was a shop in the old kind of where Derby is now used to have independent shops, and there's a record shop upstairs there, and you just go troweling through these boxes of 50 pence, 20 pence records, and anything that had like a woman with an afro on the cover, if it was cheap enough, you'd buy. Now, but bearing in mind, what I'm talking about is you probably had the money to buy like 1 or 2 records a week max.
Yeah.
And you'd go home and some of them would be trash, or some of them would be, a lot of the times it's complex, because essentially the math is this, right? You're in Derby. So what was really strange to me is when much later in my career, when I started going to the States, you can go to like thrift stores in the States or a record store in the States, and you've got all these old records that are really cheap, but you're buying them from the generation of people that grew up in the Bronx or in Brooklyn or wherever you are, 10 years ago, they don't want the records anymore, yeah? So the stuff they were buying was, amazing. I'm in Derby, so a lot of it is kind of like, you go through and this, you're flicking through these things and it's kind of like sounds of the Derbyshire Railways, brass trombone sections, it's like that. But occasionally you're going to get this soul record, but the soul record you're going to get is like Motown hits or covers or, it's like, some kind of string, What's It Loves, string orchestra.
Oh, Jeff Love.
Jeff Love, there you go, string orchestra, covers of Bond, you know what I mean? So basically, but it was that. So you're just buying what you could, trying to get hold of kind of some soul music and R&B. And then basically all your mates would be doing the same, or my little crew, and then we'd be taping everything and swapping stuff. And you kind of, you'd find out about Parliament, Funkadelic, Sly and the Family Stone, Herbie Hancock, Donald Byrd. Blue Note was something you could get. You could buy Blue Note, but that was more traditional jazz. So we were probably listening to jazz more than we would just because you didn't have access to the funk and the soul and the rare grooves and all that. So that was the thing. So I was buying that. And then obviously all the new stuff. So my earliest stuff was like early Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, Eric B. and Rakim. And then the next wave was like Jungle Brothers, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Gangstar. That stuff was like the new hip hop to me when it first came out. So I was up on that. And I think really what happened was, the first part of it was DJing. So DJing happened because we used to go to the clubs, and in Derby you had Blue Note, and they would split it between indie and hip hop and soul. So literally they'd swap over every hour or half hour. And all the indie kids would go upstairs, their DJ would come off, and we'd all come downstairs, and Russell or V Brown or Soul Syndicate, these guys would go on and DJ, and we'd listen to that music for an hour, and then you'd switch over. But it was all the cool kids in the city, but there wasn't enough of us to make a night for just hip hop or a night for just indie. So we were all in one space on a Thursday night for the Blue Note.
So was that Russell from Progress?
Russell from Progress. He started off as kind of a soul and reggae DJ, and Russell was a good DJ, but the main thing about Russell, he was always very entrepreneurial. He had connections. He was good at dealing with people. So he'd get us the clubs. He brokered the deal. He wasn't the best hip hop DJ or soul DJ. In fact, I think it took him about 20 years to learn to mix. But he'd get us through the door, and then, like Pooey and Mikey D and all those guys that was the original Soul Syndicate. Those guys would be in there, and then some of us younger kids. So there was G-Force, Rags, myself, KGB, some of the guys that were doing hip hop. We'd occasionally get a little slot. So really, what would happen is when you wanted to do a party. So a lot of those times you'd have your regular Thursday night at Blue Note, and the only other things was someone would have a birthday party and book a DJ, and that was the other time there'd be a hip hop night or a soul night, right? And when there was a party on, you'd go to Russell or Soul Syndicate. If you were kind of, more black, you go to Soul Syndicate. If you were a bit more mainstream, you go to Russell. And you book them to DJ, and they'd be able to get a venue and blah, blah, blah for your birthday. But what started to happen is, because I was buying this music, and I was just literally every bit of money. So I left home really young. So I left home at like 16, right? And my dole check would come, and immediately what I'd do is I'd go to the record shop, go to BPM, and spend most of my dole check on records, and then spend 2 weeks trying to work it out around food and electric and all the rest of it. All my money went on music, but people knew I had this record collection, right? So when they wanted to have a party and they couldn't book a DJ, they'd come to me, and that's how I started getting my first gigs. It wasn't because they wanted me because I was a good DJ. It was just because they couldn't afford, the other broke people around me that wanted, having the 19th birthday or whatever, couldn't afford to book a proper DJ, so they booked me. And then through that, people started to know that I DJ'd. And then Russell started giving me a couple of slots. So he gave me my first little, okay, you can do the half-hour warm-up or whatever. And the thing that was different about me than the other DJs, because I was coming from a hip-hop background, and through buying records, I was buying hip-hop and I was buying soul. And the big thing was, I'm buying hip-hop records, but because I'm into we called it rare groove at the time, right? But because I'm into the old soul and funk, I'm hearing these breaks and I'm like, I've got that record. And all they've done is looped it up and put drums on it. Like, I know that, I've got that one at home, right? So I kind of had this understanding of how hip hop was being made because I had the original breaks. So when I started DJing, I would mix the records, because I knew about, scratching and mixing and blah, blah, blah. That my generation, so me, Rag, certain other DJs, we knew about that. The older guys weren't mixing records. So when I went on my USP for Derby at that point in time, as I was probably the only black music DJ that was mixing and trying to scratch and stuff like that, these guys were just, so, you've got to think that most DJ culture in this country, black music comes from reggae sound systems, not from hip hop. Hip hop was an American thing. People liked hip hop music, but they came from sound systems. And your original sound systems, if you went to a blues party or whatever, they had one turntable. So basically you had someone with the mic, he's going to play a 7-inch, then he's going to talk a little bit and he's going to put the next 7-inch in. And when you rewind, you're rewinding that one, or you're pulling the needle back on that one thing. There wasn't even two turntables.
Yeah, I remember playing on, it was one of the local reggae sound systems, and I was taking two turntables and they were like, what?
Yeah.
It was just totally alien to them because of that. And
And it was weird. It was almost a bit of backlash, because the DJs were looking at me like, what are you doing? But probably a little bit of a, do we need to know how to do this? And I always remember one time being in the club and I was playing UK soul, right? So R&B type stuff. And I had this track that everyone, it was a big track at the time. And I had my other track on and I'm dropping the track in and pulling it out and then dropping it because I'm mixing it, right? And I remember there was this older black woman, she probably wasn't older, but she was older than me because I was like a young teenager at the time. And she was just there going, stood near me dancing, and she was like, just play the fucking record, And I was like, but people didn't understand. They were like, why aren't you, because you drop the bit in and everyone would recognize it and go, oh, and then you pull it out and then you drop the bit in. But she was like, just play the fucking record, because they didn't understand, that DJ thing. So I think when I started, the thing that made me different as a DJ in Derby is no one was really, the kids that were mixing and scratching weren't getting gigs. So I was probably one of the first, certainly playing soul and hip hop that was actually mixing and scratching.
Would they have been maybe coming more from an electro sort of side, the ones that were scratching and stuff?
I think, so the hip hop kids, obviously they would have been listening to electro and then early hip hop. And then, but if you were listening to hip hop, you were always aware of mixing and scratching because it was on some of them, Grandmaster Flash Adventures on the Week. It was on those records. So you would, and the bits we'd see from Yo MTV or just on, it was part of the culture, right? So he was aware of it. But a lot of the guys, the black DJs that were older than myself or DJs playing black music were coming from a reggae background or soul background or whatever. So there wasn't that thing around. It was just, you just played a good record, do you know what I mean? And you usually had an MC. The DJ in reggae sound system is the guy that holds the mic, and the selector is the guy that plays the records, right? So, the DJ really is the guy with the charisma that's going to talk over the mic, and the selector is just the one who's picking the next tune. Putting the record on wasn't a big deal in reggae sound system culture, and that bled into, so the way we DJ'd, it was different to America, do you know what I mean? And I still think that's had an impact on how we produce music and make music and everything, because we've come from that reggae sound system, because most of the, first people over here that was doing black music was from Jamaica, as opposed to, they've been in, America was different, you know what I mean? So, and then from that, really, the production thing was, me producing really started because I used to, so nowadays, if you're into music, right, there's gonna be someone dropping something every other week. There's no shortage of music. But back in the days, firstly, to hear the music, unless you was in London or Birmingham and the pirate DJs were playing stuff all the time, you had to buy the music. So you were buying a cassette or you were buying vinyl. That's expensive. So you're only gonna buy maybe one thing a week of a new release, right? And the other thing is these artists, there was only a handful of artists. You had Gangstar, BDP, EPMD, Eric B. and Ricky. So really you might have 10 artists really that are dropping, that are decent, that are dropping hip hop across a year. And these guys are putting one album out a year. So if you into, let's say you like Eric B. and Rakim, Boogie Down Productions and Gangstar, they're your three groups that you're really into, right? Those guys are only going to drop one album a year. So you might only have an album you can even go and buy and so you're going to buy every 12 inch and everything because there's nothing coming out, do you know what I mean? So I really wanted new music, But at the same time, I'm listening to these hip hop records, sampling music that I've got the soul records of. And I'm like, if I start making my own music, I haven't got to wait for new music to be released because I can produce my own. So I'm like, I could do this. So I could just, so basically I bought a friend of mine, this guy Carlton, who was like this black guy I knew from Derby that produced house music, right? Early Chicago, Detroit sounding house music. And he had this drum machine he was selling. So I bought this drum machine from him and I was like, how do you use it? And he was like, no one showed me, I'm not showing you. That was my introduction to music production. He was like, you got to learn for yourself. It was the best advice of probably, best thing anyone ever done for me. So I went home, I remember I had a really bad cold. I'd saved up to buy this drum machine. I had no idea. I just, not only did I not know how to use the interface, but I think it was a Boss Dr. Rhythm, it was called, I think it was a 330 or 550 or something like that. But I didn't even understand the basis of like the kick goes on the 1 and the snare goes on the 2. I just didn't know anything about anything. I've never played any music. I just know how to DJ at this point, right? So basically I had Sound Labs, which are then like the belt drive turntables.
Oh yeah.
Those and a DJ mix on this drum machine. And then I had a couple of tape decks. So what I realized I had to do, because all this, I'm going to get 2 copies of the same record. You're not buying 2 copies of nothing. You're struggling to buy 1 copy. So what I used to do is I'd program a drum beat that was terrible, and I'd play the drum beat into the mixer and get my turntable and I'd drop a break in. And then I'd wait the 1 bar, 2 bar for the length of time that break was. I'd leave that gap and then I'd drop the break in again. So I'm leaving the gaps. Then I'm playing the tape back through into the mixer, and in the gap, I'm dropping the same break in again. So then I end up with a continuous loop, right? And then I'm playing that tape through again, and I might drop a horn stab or a vocal sample or something like that. And then I play it through again and drop other sounds. So that's how I was making the thing. There was no sampler. So basically that's how I went from like DJing to producing. And when I started doing it, it's just because I wanted to hear more hip hop, but there was nothing coming out. I didn't have money to buy stuff. So I was like, if I can learn to produce, I can have an endless supply of music because I can create my own. It was never about I wanted to be an artist at that point.
Yeah. So at what point did you start to take production seriously? Or at what point were people showing interest in your music? How were you sharing it to people?
So the first thing really was, there was a local crew in Derby called Posse in Effect. There was a couple of reggae sound systems, and then there was Posse in Effect. And like, I didn't really know those guys, but they were like, we used to go to 20th Century, which was another club in Derby. And I used to see those guys, and they were the ones that had Kangols and the trainers, and do you know what I mean? So to me, I was like, these guys are just so fucking cool. This girl I knew, who I was friends with, was friends with one of the guys from Posse Effect, and I knew they were like, they breakdanced and they rapped and DJ and bits and bobs. And at this point, I'd started making beats, so I maybe had 10 beats or something that I'd made. And I was like, oh, I thought to take this further, I need a rapper. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't really know anyone that rapped. I knew a few friends that kind of messed about, but they were whack and they weren't cool, so I didn't want them. But I wanted these guys because they were Posse Effect and they were like super cool, right?
Yeah.
So I asked this girl like, oh, speak to your friend, see if he, So he came and I met him, this guy Koki, and he was like, yeah, I might do some bits. So I played him some of the beats, and then me and him started working together. Then there was this other guy, MYT, that he was good friends with, and he was a rapper as well. So they were my first rappers, and we started making these little demos. Very slowly, because they were super lazy. Not so much Koki, but MYT. But yeah, to me, that was it then. I'd landed. Everything I wanted to achieve in life, I was there. And then I suppose it just kind of grew from slowly making demos with them, sending out some demos, nothing really happening with them. It was just all super local at this point. And then I started working with Yogi, who you know. Yogi was young at the time. So there was Yogi and Shade One. Shade One was still at school. So he was like literally first time Shade One came to my house, he was in his school uniform. And Yogi was like, even, like he was out of school, but he was like a young dude. And Yogi had come up on the reggae sound system. So he was a rapper, but his first thing was chatting on sound systems. So he was from that background, but he could rap. And everyone was like, this young guy, Yogi, he's nice. So me and him started, and we just clicked. I think we was into the same hip hop. And Koki's older than me. So Koki was into like the old school hip hop and very much a purist. But Yogi was kind of into the stuff that, like, you know, with his gangsta, you know, like the slightly younger stuff. So I was producing more. This was around the time, I think Wu-Tang was just about to come out. Because when Wu-Tang came out, for me, everything changed. Like the sound just shifted all of a sudden like a notch.
Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU's been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems. And they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show the support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout. You also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on, so I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com, and if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com.
Just before we go on, was there much of a relationship through the time that we've discussed between Nottingham and Derby with the sort of hip hop scenes?
There was, because you've got to remember, like, rewind back then, like the hip hop scene was tiny, right? It was like this really underground micro thing. It was a bit of a cult scene. So there was a thing that if I was in a hip hop crew in Derby, like Posse in Effect in Derby, what would happen is there would be a hip hop jam, whether it was in London, Birmingham, Sheffield, Manchester, wherever, yeah. And every hip hop crew from around the country would go to that jam. And you get to know who everyone was. So if you look at someone like Goldie, drum and bass Goldie,
yeah.
Like, I knew who Goldie was because he was part of the West Midlands Wolverhampton hip hop crew, and he was a face on the scene. You know, like in the mod culture, they talk about faces on the scene. Like you knew who was who. So I know who, say, Colin Carruthers was from Nottingham, or some of them Nottingham guys were, just because you go to the hip hop jam and they will be there. And it wasn't like there's like 500 people in the, you know, there's like 200 people there or 100 people there, but everyone was like, they were from their scene. So you'd go and you'd represent your area. Do you know what I mean? You'd probably get on a coach or travel up together or whatever. And so everyone knew people from, but largely at the time, it was like, there was a bit of rivalry. So there was rivalry anyway. It was kind of like a thing that if you went to an area and someone thought you were soft, they were going to try and rob you. And he could easily kick off. So it wasn't like now, do you know what I mean? I suppose, yeah, this stuff still happens, but it was like, you had to be on it and you weren't going to go to one of them areas on your own. Like, you know, like you had to go with a crew of people because, you know, people would try it with you, you know, like you could be in problems. So, like when you went as Derby, you went together as Derby.
Yeah.
And when you went as Nottingham, so we kind of knew those guys, and I'm sure some people have relationships, but it wasn't like a super friendly thing, and it was like there was kind of a rivalry of like which crew is the flyest, who's got the best clothes, prettiest girls, you know, best breakdancers, best rappers, blah 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 blah, and whether that's and the other times you saw people was at Carnival, West Indian Carnival, so you go to all the carnivals in the region. And again, you go with all your boys because it could kick off, sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm a white kid, so and nowadays it doesn't matter. Then it did. So you almost had to. It was almost, you know, like I was on the outskirts of it. Like I could kind of roll, and you know, I was kind of the fact that I could even go with some of my black friends and be in these environments was a kind of a badge of honor, because most white kids that were into hip hop wouldn't even have been allowed to go to those places, or they would have had problems if they were there. So the fact that I was even there with people was a thing. Whereas nowadays, it, you know, like it doesn't matter, hip hop's, you know, past that. But at the time, yeah. So there was a scene, and I would say everyone from Derby knew the Nottingham crew, and all the Nottingham people knew the Derby crew, but we probably weren't friends.
Yeah, yeah.
There might have been a mutual respect at best.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, just going back to where you were with Yogi then.
Yeah, so me and Yogi started working on stuff again slowly for a period of time, and then we started sending out some demos, and then we used to like send stuff out to labels, and we just thought that a label was gonna like ring up one day and be like, hey, we've got your thing, and here's the check, and we're sending the limo down. And just no idea, because we're from Derby. I don't know anyone that's ever done anything in music. I've got no uncle that knew someone that was in a band it's Derby. Like no one's ever been successful. Nothing's happened. Do you know what I mean? So there was like one studio that was in the city for black music, and that made reggae music. They weren't interested in us having around. So we were just doing stuff in our bedroom. And then I sent out some demo tapes. And the way I used to work it out is I'd buy records and I'd be like, okay, so Gangstar's on this label, so I'm going to send them a demo tape because I like Gangstar. So when they hear my stuff, they're going to like it because they like Gangstar. What I don't realise is whoever's signed Gangstar in New York, and then it's been licensed to whatever label in London, who probably don't just know the sales in New York were X, so we can probably get sales of Y, so we'll pick it up, and the guy that's probably licensed it, or the label that's picked it up, is probably into flipping dance music and doesn't give a rubbish certainly about the nuances of East Coast hip hop at that time, so they're not going to give a rubbish about what I'm sending them. But I don't know this, so I'm just sending out tapes waiting for the phone to ring. When I say I'm sending out tape, it's not even like I'm sending out a demo with a press shot and a back. It's like an old TDK D60 from the back of my sofa with probably like 2 tracks with Yogi rapping, because that's all he got around to doing. And the rest is just full of my instrumental beats. And I'm sending him 60 minutes worth of music, thinking I'm going to get a record deal. Like just waiting for the letter to come through the door. And then, but one of them, so when Wu-Tang first came out, I'm on about Protect Your Neck, the first single.
Yeah.
There was a mailing address on the 12-inch, right? And I sent out one to Wu-Tang Records in Staten Island, Shaolin. And the A&R, this guy called Class, heard my demo. And I remember there was a track, there was like 3 Yogi tracks and then some instrumentals. And he called me up, like little old me in Derby, and was like, really like your stuff, want to do some work with you. You need to come out here for a meeting. And I'm just like, whoa, like my head was just blown. I was like,
yeah.
At the time, like Wu-Tang, they weren't big at this point. Like Meth hadn't dropped. I don't know whether, I think 36 Chambers was out. And Protect Your Neck was like a big track at the time for underground hip hop. But I was like, wow, stuff that Tim Westwood's playing or 279's playing, those guys have heard my stuff. So I was like, so they want us to come out for a meeting. I'm on the dole, I ain't got no money. So I went to the local neighborhood guy who was like into hip hop. He funded the local pirate radio. So at this point I'm playing on pirate radio in Derby as well. So there was 2, I played on Star FM and then Power 99. Which basically playing on pirate radio in Derby, right? You filled a milk crate up with vinyl, and you walked across Derby to wherever the radio station was, which was usually like in a squat or in like upstairs in someone's house. And you played, and because we were playing hip hop and we weren't big DJs, we got the graveyard shift. So we're playing like 2 a.m. When you finish, you don't get paid. When you finish your shift, you walk home with your crate of records. If the police see you with your records walking through, they know what you're doing. So they're probably going to try and take your records. This is everything I've got in life.
Yeah.
All my money's gone into these records. So you're literally like ducking and diving into doorways if you hear a car coming and all this. And again, if you get raided while you're on air, they can lock you up. They seize all the equipment. They take all your records. And the person that owns the equipment is going to have an issue with you because it got raided on your shift. And you get paid nothing to be a pirate, but we were desperate for a slot. Do you know what I mean? And so me and this guy called Kingy, we used to DJ together and have this slot. And then, so we started doing pirate. What was I saying before that?
You went to that guy to see if he could fund your trip?
Yeah. So he funded the radio station. He always said, if I can help you in any way, let me know. So he was the only guy I knew with any money. So I went to him and I'm like, listen, I've had this phone call, they want me to go out there, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you and me will go. And he bought, and this is back in the days, like, it's not none of this £700, £600, £500 flight to New York. They didn't exist. So he bought two plane tickets and me and him flew out to New York. Neither of us had been before. Got there, The guy was meant to meet us, didn't turn up. I'm in New York. Eventually, I managed to get hold of someone on the phone. We got ourselves out to Staten Island, went to the offices. The guy isn't there. We're sat in the offices. This guy called Mook, who was like part of the management team, he's there, so he brings us in. He doesn't really know who we are, why we're there. So starts trying to pitch to us about what services they could sell us, like promo and stuff. And I'm like, nah, like your guy told us. And I'm like, oh, it feels like we've come all the way out here and we're getting hustled. But like RZA was there, U-God was there, various other people that we met and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually Class turned up and he was great. You know, he took us around, we stayed with him, was out there for a few days before the flight back. And so we had that, and that just gave me like, at that point I was like, this is possible, this could happen. But then nothing happened, and then Class left Wu-Tang, because around that time RZA had got this new deal with Sony and taken his kind of key staff with him and not taking Class. So Class had got the Sons of Man deal, the Old Dirty deal and various other bits, and he felt a little bit slighted, so he set up his own thing. And then I was kind of, it felt like in limbo at that point. And then Class rang, and he's like, right, I've left and I've set up my own thing and I've got this artist, Nitty Gritty, and I want you to come out here and produce his album for him, maybe. And that's it, look at this. So
the exact collection, the exact record, I got that from your collection.
Oh, there you go.
I feel like Nardwar, you know, when he's got all the like token stuff.
I don't think I've got this.
I think it's one of the only things I've got with an acapella on it.
Yeah. So yeah, Nitty Gritty, True Grain Entertainment, Class set up that. So I went out there for 3 months. Again, my friend helped me fund going out there. Moved out there and was producing for him. He never ended up well, that came out and everything else got dropped. He had some of the best music I've ever heard. It was amazing. But he ended up falling out. I think the story goes that he ripped off the investor and then something, so it just didn't happen. But he was from Queensbridge, same blocks as Havoc, so he grew up with Havoc. So knew all those guys and Nas and blah, blah, blah. So, but during that trip, Class used to take me around with him everywhere, and Class was really well connected. So prior to doing Wu-Tang, he'd done Onyx, he'd done Busta Rhymes, so he knew a lot of people, he knew Nas, all these different people. So he'd take me to like D&D Studios, Premier would be there.
Wow.
Group home, and at the time Class was working on Shabazz the Disciples project with Lord Jamar from Brand Nubian. So he used to take me over to Lord Jamar's house while Shabazz, and I was like a massive Shabazz fan, like out of all the Wu-Tang artists, Shabazz was one of my favorite. He had Death Be the Penalty out at the time. That was one of my favorite records. So at the time, probably my 2 favorite records were Death Be the Penalty by Shabazz, which was to me like the most underground Wu track. And Dead Prez had the Red Tape out, which had Food, Clothes and Shelter, Happiness, and another track I can't remember. And Lord Jamar was involved with both of those projects. And when I met Lord Jamar, I was like, I love these tracks, da 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 da. So Shabazz came through and I'm like, you know, I love your stuff. Gave him this like, again, 90-minute D90 beat tape full of tracks. And then he introduced me to M1 from Dead Prez. And then M1, we went out to this club night, introduced me to Stick at Dead Prez a few weeks later, and me and Stick got on. So then I came back to the States. I don't know whether I recorded with Shabazz before I came back, but I stayed in touch with Shabazz and stayed in touch with Stick, and I'm sending them out beat tapes all the time, and Stick liked some of my stuff. And then I got this single deal from these kids in Manchester, and to do a single, and I spoke to Shabazz about doing it. Shabazz was like, yeah, so we got airfare to go out there again to record that, and went out and we recorded a track with Shabazz which was called Ghetto Disciples.
Is this about 95, 96?
Yeah, so I think the first time I went to New York was 96, so probably at 97, maybe 98 now.
What was it like when you were over there and you're like going to like D&D studios? You're just like pinching yourself, just like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And then it's like, but I'm so young and naive, I was just like, yeah, this is to happen, I can be part of this. But D&D now to me is not what D&D, when I went there, it was just like, we're in D&D studios. But I didn't know, like I'd heard of it, but it wasn't like now D&D is legendary status.
Yeah.
Right? like meeting Lord Jamar was like really special because it was like brand Nubian, and I'd been listening to brand Nubian for 5 years, you know. But like I remember like Class saying to me, like, I was like, yo, I love Nas's album, da da da. He was like, Nas ain't nothing, you know, like, well, you're gonna see Nas when you're out here, like, you know, I'm basically kind of saying like I'm a more important person than Nas. Like Nas has to speak to me with respect, you know, like you'll see when you see him, like, because Nas was new then. So like D&D wasn't a big thing at that point. Like Premier was because I'd grown up on like the first Gangsta album, then Step in the Arena and blah, blah, blah. So it was like, but certain people like Dead Prez, they weren't even signed yet, or maybe they'd just been signed to Loud. So it was like, there was a lot of people that I was meeting that they weren't, you know, like, and I remember we met Finster and Bundy, who this, so I met those guys in D&D, and I was like, yo, I really like your 12-inch because they had 112 out. I was like, here's my beat tape and da-da-da. And afterwards, Class was like, you don't have to be on those guys, like, they're no one. You know, like, but there was a lot of people that like weren't that big yet. Do you know what I mean? When we're meeting them.
Just a side note on Finster Bundy, I think I got a Finster Bundy 12 out of your collection. I sold it for about 30 quid.
Yeah, oh, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, can I buy it back? But yeah.
No.
But you know, a lot of that stuff got sold when I eventually moved to New York and I couldn't take my records with me.
Yeah.
So there was like the big sale that you got some of that stuff from then. But, and what's interesting, just going back to that, digging through the crates in the market hall, is later on when I'd speak to Shabazz, like years later, and Stick from Dead Prez, he'd be like, what they'd say, what we liked about your beats is, they said, oh, because you were from the UK, you had a different sound to the producers, where a lot of the producers that were sending them stuff, it was similar. Because obviously we were influenced by the music at the time, but your stuff always sounded different because you were from the UK. Now I think there's a grain of truth in why they think it was different, because I think growing up with our influence when I got into hip hop was hip hop, and then those guys were into reggae sound systems. So that even the way you'd listen to music, you'd go around someone's house and they'd have a tape deck, going into an EQ, going into another EQ, going into an amp in speakers, right? And those EQs would just be set with the bass all the way up. Like mids all the way down, bass all the way up, and a little bit of treble. So you literally be listening to something, you could barely hear any lyrics, you just hear bass. And that was because they came from reggae sound systems. They weren't listening to music like that in the US. Yes, bass is an important thing, but not like for the Jamaicans, do you know what I mean? So I think when I produce, even now my stuff is bass heavy compared to US stuff. Like if you listen to Dr. Dre, like his stuff, the bass is very thin compared to anything that's going to come out of the UK, right? Because we grew up around reggae sound systems. So, I didn't grow up around them, but I grew up around kids that grew up around reggae sound systems. But the other thing is that the American guys that were producing, so if you look at Dilla, you know, the Legendary or whatever, or Premier, those guys would go into digging the crates in the, you know, wherever the local cheap records were, and they're getting old, you know, soul records and Latin soul and jazz records and jazz funk, because that's what the generation before them listened to. Didn't want the records no more. They're in there. I didn't get those records. We got Jeff Love and his orchestra, right? We got, you know, soundtrack of the 70s, film scores. So the stuff I was sampling was different, because when you know this, when you go back in the days and you went to the market stalls to buy records and you're flicking through, there's the soul R&B section, and everything in there is going to be £5 or £10. Then there's the 50p section. That's where I had to go digging from. I can't go and buy the Isaac Hayes thing because it's £10. So I've got to get Jeff Love and his orchestra and get my samples from that. So what I was sampling was different, because the music that you could get for cheap was different, you know, and the stuff that was £10 in the soul and R&B section in the UK was in the thrift 50-cent section in New York. So when I went to New York, I'm like, oh my God. I remember going to the Aolites guys when I was working with them. They were like, oh, they were staying in this old lady's house in the basement that she rented to them. And she was like, I've got all these 7-inch singles, you can have them. And they were like filthy, like dusty, crackly, but there was great stuff in there. But it was valueless over there. But in the UK, they would have been of worth because it was soul. So I think there was something about the sound that I developed that was different to the US because of the thing. The other thing is as well, is when I was, because I didn't have that peer thing, right? So when I started sampling, I would listen to Premiere tracks and going, right, or RZA tracks and going, he sampled this piano stab and another piano stab and put it together, or he's played the piano stab across different keys. So that's how I thought he was doing it. So what I was doing was sampling individual notes from different records and joining them together to make a piece of music. Later on, much later, when you get access to this music through, you know, people making breaks tapes and then later on Spotify and all the rest of it, you start hearing the loops that Premiere took, RZA took, whatever. But at the time I didn't realize they were loops.
Yeah.
So my style of sampling was different to a lot of the American producers. Not trying to compare myself to Premiere, RZA, whatever, but these were the people I was listening to. These were the people. But the way I learned to produce was I was sampling little, like my first album, The Birth, if you listen to that, most of that, there's probably one or two tracks where there's a break. Everything else is a sound where I'm sampling a chord and I'm playing it on different keys, or I'm sampling different bits from different records and putting them together. There's not those loops, because one, I didn't have access to the records with dope loops on. And then secondly, I just didn't think that's how they were making music. So like, you know, a lot of the Premiere stuff, the chops and stuff from the same record or the full loops, I just, you know, like California Soul, Molly and Ashore and stuff, I didn't realize that was a loop. Do you know what I mean? I thought that was him taking different sections. So I almost was doing like the chops before a lot of the producers were doing the chops, because I thought that, you know what I mean, that's how music was made.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anyone around me to go, no, we're just getting a good quality record in the first place and taking the whole section, you know. So I think all that kind of gave me a sound. So when I went to the States, that I wouldn't say I had an advantage, because I don't think I did, but it gave me something that was unique. So when people listen to my music, they either were going, yeah, this is different, I like this, or they were like, this is different, it's whack, you don't sound official. So I kind of got those two responses.
Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU has been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems. And they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show the support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout. You also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on, so I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com, and if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com.
So when did you do your first album then?
So The Birth came out in 1998, and that was through, there was a label called Bomb Hip Hop in the Bay Area.
I didn't realise it come out through them.
Yeah, so and at that point they just done turntablist records, so Battle of the DJs, that type of thing. I didn't really know the label, but when I went to start doing bits with Wu-Tang, they said there's this guy you should hook up with who does some of the artwork. He'd done the Sons of Man logo and different things for different Wu-Tang artists, and his name's Darius and he's from London. So I was like, okay, there's a UK guy doing stuff for Wu-Tang. So when I came back to London, I touched base with him. Me and him met up, we became friends. And he randomly met RZA at this thing. He was a graphic designer. He was like, I love hip hop. I like what you guys are doing. Showed him some of the stuff. And RZA had given him some bits to do, right? Some artwork bits to do. So he did my Baby J logo, you know, the baby with the things. So Darius did that for me. And quite a lot of design for me in the early stages. So, but Darius did all the artwork for Dave Paul, who ran Bomb Hip Hop. So he was like, I think Darius had told Dave about me. Dave really liked my stuff, and he was like, I want to do an instrumental album for you. and out like a Baby J instrumental album, because he'd done basically turntablist stuff and instrumental albums. That's what Bomb did, and I was like, cool. But I was like, I want to do a proper album, with rappers on, like. And Dave wasn't sure because he'd never done that. But to me, I just wanted to be like the people I was listening to, and they weren't doing instrumental albums. So I was like, I want to do a proper album. And I was like, look, I can get the MCs. Like, I know some US guys, I know some UK guys. It could be dope. At the time, I don't think anyone had done that, like where it was like a producer album with rappers on. Like now it's quite common, but I can't think of one that happened before that. And it wasn't like I decided I wanted to do that. It's just no one had put me on their projects, and like I was the first one who got the break out of the people around me. So we'd done the Shabazz 12 inches. I'd done 2 12s with him, and then Lamb's Blood and Ghetto Disciples. And then I got the deal from the Bomb, and it was like I think it was a tiny advance, but essentially what they did is they were paying for studio and they were paying for airfare to get back and forth. And so I was going out and I was staying in Shabazz's apartment in the projects, which was a whole Red Up projects in like 1990 something, 1998, 99, 97. And there was no white people around at all. The only white people in Red Up projects is the police. So they were seeing me walk through there and just be like, who is this crazy white dude who thinks he can walk? They were like, come here. And I best Oliver Twist that accent. Oh, mate, how you doing? Apples and pears. And they were just like, wait, where you from? I'm like, from England. Why are you here? Oh, I'm here with Shabazz. And Shabazz's uncle was a big dude in the project, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up being like the mascot. Hey, the crazy white kid with gold teeth, So I was kind of saved, but it was like, yeah, the projects were highest murder rate in America at that point.
Wow.
Projects. So it was a crazy place. So I'm out there staying with Shabazz and recording, but through that, I'm meeting different rappers, and I'm quite good friends with Em and Stick from Dead Prayers. They did a track for the album. And then I was like, Em, I really need some other rappers. So he was like, I know some people. So he brought through A-Likes, who obviously I did 2 tracks with them. I really got on with those guys, started working with those a lot. And then there was another girl, Fire, that I met through A-Likes, and Bless, who was Shabazz's cousin, and Bang, who was one of M's friends, and different people, and Nimrod, who was, so basically at the time, Dead Prez were part of this thing called People Army, which was like a political movement that had a lot of music artists in it. And so, a lot of the artists on the Birth album were People Army artists. And the I Ching tattoo that they have on the neck, and the Dead Prez logo, that's the People Army logo. So this is before it was RBG, which kind of it moved on into.
Just on that then, because I'm sure we'll kind of touch on politics and things as we go on. I think we're going to need to do a 2-parter.
Yeah, we may do.
Because you are quite kind of politically aware and driven, aren't you? Like, is that something that had been in you from being younger then, or was that kind of through osmosis of these guys, or?
I think a bit of both. So there was no political education as such, and I didn't grow up in abject poverty or anything like that. But I think I always had a bit of a sense of certain things was wrong. So, like, I think my mum, like, and it was kind of in the background, like it was never mentioned as a thing, but like my mum fostered kids a little bit, and she used to look after this disabled couple, all voluntarily, like, so I used to just get taken around to this couple's house, Kath and John, who was like these 2 disabled people who lived in West End, and she'd just go around and, do a bit of shopping for them and clean the house, and she wasn't paid for it, it's just something she did.
Wow.
So I was never aware that anyone else didn't do this. Do you know what I mean? And like when I was growing up, there was this black kid, Robert, that we fostered for a while. He didn't live with us full time. So I think he was in care, but he used to come with us like 3 or 4 days a week for however many years. And I didn't know that other people, like it was just like, yeah, this black kid lives in my house. He's cool, I love him. He's like older than me, but I just didn't know any different. So I just thought, I suppose there was a bit of a social thing. And my mum, dad's families were from Grimsby originally, so it's quite working class. They're quite poor families, the docks in Grimsby. Grimsby's a dump of an area still. So, I suppose there was a bit of that in my psyche somewhere. And then I got into like black music, which is a music of, especially hip hop, revolution.
Yeah.
Is a music of resistance and fight the power and all that type of thing. So I'm listening to this stuff. I didn't get on well with school, so I wasn't interested. I loved school, but I hated lessons. And I just, from an early age, there was just this thing of someone would be like, you got to do this. And I'd be like, why? Whether it's my parent or a teacher or whatever, and they'd be like, you're not meant to be asking us why, you're just meant to be doing it. I'm like, nah, you got to explain to me why, I'm not interested. So I was always pushing back. Then I got to a certain age, like a young teenager, and I was like, you can't, wait, what are you, if I actually tell you, fuck it, what are you going to do? So I kind of realized that it was all bullshit, you know, like whether it's school, religion, work, all these things. I'm like, there's all these things that I'm meant to follow. But actually, I don't think I want to, you know, and like no one's. So I just started being I was a very difficult teenager. So I was like in school, but I wasn't in any classrooms. So educationally, I did really badly. And then I found music and I was like, I'm just doing this hip hop thing. Like, this is what I'm interested in. So this kind of thing, bit like I'd already dropped out, you know, I moved out of home at 16. I was having my first child at 17, not planned, you know. So I was like, I was around lots of, you know, hip hop was connected to street life. So I'm around a lot of street life, a lot of criminality, a lot of poverty. You know, it was rough, which wasn't what I grew up around, you know. So I think I just I'd grown up in Derby. I went to, you know, middle class, largely white school. And then all of a sudden I'm around hip hop culture and black communities in Derby and Normanton. And I'm like, there's these two worlds that don't know each other exist. And it just gave me a different perspective. So I think, and that it's interesting now because as a young kid that really wanted to be down with black culture, black music, you know, would dress black, talk a little bit black, you know, was around lots of black friends and white friends, you know what I mean? But at the time I didn't know why. Now, as an older man, I can look back and go, I was rebelling against capitalism. I was rebelling against, you know, capitalist values and white society and what that stood for. But I didn't know that at that time. I just knew that I didn't want to get a job in a bank, wear a suit and toe the line. I didn't know why, what I was angry at. Or I did, but I couldn't articulate it. So I think the politics of socialist politics, communist politics came later. But certainly Dead Prez and People Army, when I met those guys, because Wu-Tang was more 5%, was more, you know, Shabazz was a lot of references to religious studies and that type of thing, whereas Dead Prez was socialists. And I wasn't at that point. Do you know what I mean? I didn't understand what that was really. So I remember Stick and M putting me onto certain books like Assault Shakur's autobiography. They had the Chairman Mao Red Book because the Black Panthers used to sell the Chairman Mao Red Book, partially because it was a socialist book, but partially just because it made a raise selling it to students and it brought in some money for them to do their programs, right? And I remember that in my dad's garage, he had Chairman Mao's Red Book in a box from my uncle who was a sailor, because we're from Grimsby and he used to be on the boats. And he brought one home and it was in a box somewhere. So I was like, I got some. So then I went home and found in my dad's garage this Red Book and I start reading every page of Chairman Mao's comment. And I'm like, wow, you know, like I've found, do you know what I mean? And certain things just started slotting together between me hating English, British, capitalist, ruling class, royal family, that whole thing that I knew I already hated but didn't know why, and this idea of socialist and communist politics, and the connection between that and hip hop and where hip hop fitted in that. So that's where that came from. And Dead Prez, you know, that's from family to other stuff. I think Stick was involved with, you know, kind of revolutionary stuff from a school age, you know, strikes in school and I think M1 was around old school Panthers and political activists from a younger age. So he was aware of all that stuff from a much younger age. So I started meeting people that was around that kind of politics and being exposed to that through them. And then coming back and then I was like, who's the Socialist Worker Party? Well, let me meet with them and find out what they're about. And we set up this little thing in Derby called Ant Militia, which was like People Army, but it was like a Derby version of it. And, you know, me and some of the guys I was around set up this little thing, which was a political street organisation. It It wasn't about hip hop.
Yeah.
But we was all into hip hop, you know. So I think the music, so that's when Yogi set up Amp Records, it was through, you know, because we was interested in that stuff and bringing that into, but we were learning, you know, we didn't really understand it. So, you know, and then I became more involved with the movement at the same time being involved with hip hop. So I was like going to Socialist Worker Party meetings and going to their events nationally and demonstrations. So I'm getting a political education at the same time of doing the hip hop stuff. And kind of trying to see where it all fits. And through that, I did the Love Music, Hate Racism stuff, because there was a natural connection between socialist politics and, yeah, so I guess it had already been there, but I think being around Dead President People Army, like, fast-tracked that for me.
Yeah.
Because they would deeply, especially M1. M1 is a revolutionary, I'm not saying Stick isn't, but M1 was very involved with the movement more broadly, whereas Stick, I think it was more an ideological thing, personal thing.
So did it all just kind of feel like everything was coming together and right when you did the album?
Yeah, and there was always this slight thing in the back of my head that I'm a white kid and I'm around, you know, it's hip hop culture and, you know, it's kind of, I'm interested in kind of politics and revolutionary politics, but a lot of that is to do with black revolutionary politics, but I'm a white kid from, you know, a largely white country, and how does that fit? So there was that question in the back of my head, but I felt like I found my identity. I was like, hip hop music, revolutionary culture, all this thing kind of connects, and it kind of made sense to me. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose I really felt like I've found my identity. Do you know what I mean? And now I can look back and I kind of go, well, obviously there's a connection with black culture, because black people have been the most oppressed, historically, African people. And wherever you go around the globe where they are, they're still historically and currently the most oppressed communities. So their cultural forces, you're going to have a natural connection with. If you kind of think capitalism is a bad thing and white imperialism is a bad thing and you want to overthrow these things, there's going to be a connection with black culture, because they're the most oppressed group throughout history and currently. So now it makes sense to me, but at the time I was kind of like, am I just trying to be black? You know, there's that, you know, and your white friends around you be like, what are you trying to be black for? You know, so you have this thing, whereas now I go, no, I'm passionately interested in getting down with black culture, because white culture sucks, you know, like, I hate Oasis, you know, so, and classical music and everything in the world and all that stuff. You know, I'm not ever going to fly the British flag, and I'm really comfortable with that. And this is why, you know, there's a political backdrop to that. But at the time, you know, you're on that journey, right?
Yeah.
So you're working it out.
So when it came to releasing the album then, was it largely the focus on the US?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because I'm from here, so I wanted it to be big. I wanted to kind of be known in the US, but I wanted it to be respected here as well.
I think we've talked before about this, where I think we were just briefly chatting a little while ago, and you were saying about how you were getting all this attention in the US, but you couldn't get any sort of MCs, say, down in London on your beats.
I had to go full circle. So I remember before ever sending out demo tapes in the US, I used to go to like a Caveman gig or a Blade gig or whatever and just try and hand beat tapes. And people, one, I'm not from London, so you ain't from anywhere important. Secondly, I'm white. And them times, you know, it's like if you're white, you're not anyone important.
Yeah.
So people were just looking at me like, yeah, whatever. And no one ever got back to me. No one ever wanted to work with me. Couldn't make any connections. But all my local kids in my local area, you know, Posse in Effect, Yogi, Shape One, those guys, no one wanted to know. When I started doing bits in the States, so what happened is when I first went out to the States for that 3 months and I met Lord Jamar, Dead Prez, Shabazz, I was like, because this is pre-internet, right? So I'm like, I can promo your stuff for you back in the UK. I'll take some. So they gave me like, you know, copies of promo tapes, cassettes and flyers and stuff like that. And I came back here, and so I'd go to like 279, try and go to Westwood and various DJs, and I'd be like, oh, I'm promoting these guys in the UK. And because they knew who they were and they were interested in them, they were like, okay, come and see us. So that was an in with the UK guys.
Right.
So I'd go and have a meeting about Dead Prez and give them the latest, you know, Dead Prez tracks, Nitty Gritty tracks, you know, Shabazz the Disciple stuff. And then I'd be like, oh, there's Yogi, there's Moorish Delta 7 who we've had connections with. MSI Asylum I was working with, these were Birmingham groups. So I was kind of like, I had an in for the guys that we were working with because I had this US stuff. And then when the album came, the album was exactly that. It was Dead Prez, Shabazz the Disciple, ALX, People Army, but it was also Yogi, Moorish Delta 7, da 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 da. So it was like the UK guys and the US guys all on one album. So, but then I was like, I think I was the first producer from the UK that was working with established American artists. So all of a sudden then I was taken seriously. As soon as that album came out, then UK, you know, like it was like, who's this guy from England that's working with like Wu-Tang and Dead Prez and da-da-da. So then, yes, I'm going to be able to have a conversation with Skinny Man or Rodney P or, you know, the new guys that are coming out because I'm official, because I'm working in the US and the UK. But, you know, like, I wanted to be respected at D&D. I wanted Premier to know my name, but he still doesn't, I'm sure. But I also wanted, you know, to be able to go to, you know, Deal Real or Dark and Cold and them guys to know who I was. And in some ways that was more important to me because I was from here. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, there's been quite a few people I've had on where the sort of local, as it were, sort of seems to overlooks them. I had Newmark from J5 on, and he was like, we only got taken seriously in the US when we come over to Europe and started. So it's kind of almost like the opposite in a way. You kind of can't see the wood for the trees sometimes.
Yeah.
Was there much pushback from Dave at Bomb about having sort of Maurice Delta 7 and people like that on the album, like the UK contingent?
Nah, I think for him, I think once he agreed to have MCs, he was just kind of like, let's see what, because I was kind of like, look, we've got these UK guys, we've got, you know, US guys, and I think the only person that we had to pay for up front, I think Poetic got some money from Gravediggers, because you know he had two Poetic before that, and Gravediggers, I think their album had just come out, so that came out not long after 36 Chambers, so having him on it was a big thing. None of the Dead Prez wasn't a big artist at that point in time.
Yeah.
And Shabazz, you know, had a single out, but that was it. So having Poetic on it, but I think essentially Dave, for all of it was an experiment for him. So he didn't know whether it was going to absolutely flop because he's got rappers on and he's doing something different, or whether it was going to be his biggest selling thing ever, because he's got, you know, rappers on it and US and UK. So I think the fact that it had UK, so it had another market, was something he was interested in.
Yeah. So what was life like after the album came out, and like how did it do in the UK and in the US?
The album did okay at the time, so obviously it wasn't massive. It was, I think we made a dent in New York. I did a lot of work, so we got these little kind of 50 pence size Baby J stickers, the ball thing, my logo, and we plastered New York. So we got those, and then we got 12-inch artwork, and me and like ALX and Shabazz and some of the guys that were on it, because we were all grafting at that point. No one was making any money. Like, we plastered New York. There were more baby ball stickers up in New York than any other promo. Because interesting, when you lift up a handset in New York, the size of the little thing that had the insert, that had the information on, was just the right size you can put the sticker on. So we put them on every payphone. And we was all over. Like, a lot of guys, if they were from Queens, they were in Queens. If they were, but like ALX and them guys, Ness was from Philly originally. Shabazz is Brooklyn, but he was good. He could go everywhere. You know, some guys, they're not really coming out of their neighborhood, but we was all over Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, whatever. So we were. And then the other thing is that on the subway trains, they have a sticker that says, you know, don't push to hold the doors open. And there's a little circle thing with a line through, and the sticker was the right size for that. So we just walk through a carriage, put it up, next door, put it up, open the door into the next carriage. And we do every train we ever went on. And we basically lived on we was on trains all day, every day. So we plastered it, and you know, like Fat Beats, we had a good relationship there. So they, you know, put loads of posters up, and then Beat Street in Brooklyn was like the big store that everyone went to. They did a big promo thing, so they were like, you can put them up. So we got their staple gun and we did the whole ceiling. Like, they were like, so at that point in time, if you was New York and you was buying hip hop, you were seeing the thing. And then we tried to do our thing in London as well. So yeah, it got about, it did okay. It didn't do amazing numbers. I think it was a producer album, and that wasn't really a thing. And I wasn't famous, and there was no one on there that was massive, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I suppose, like, I would guess with Bomb that they probably wouldn't have had huge marketing budgets.
I don't think there was a marketing budget. I don't think there was any marketing spend as such. So it literally, but I mean, what Dave had the money to put me in the studio. You couldn't do it free. We got, went in the New Yorker hotel, the building, and we had a studio in there, and we worked with Carlos Bess, who engineered the first Wu-Tang album. So she got us in with him. So that was an amazing learning curve and experience. He was a great guy. But again, I could never have done that without Dave's support and investment. So I'll always be grateful to Dave for that. So yeah, there was that, but I don't think there was money spent on marketing as such. But what Dave also had is a network to distribute, so he had distribution deals, so he got it out into the stores. I think it did okay. You know, I don't think there was really anything in the way of royalties afterwards. So whatever we got up front we probably made a little bit, but essentially that was it.
Yeah. So what came next?
The next, I mean, what that did was gave me a bit of kudos. I had an album out, I was working with artists, especially in the UK, it gave me a bit of space. So then I'd say we got opportunities for Yogi's stuff. So there were more people, you know, I had it in at radio. Around this time, One Extra just started, and you had like Rodney P and Skits, Excalibur, do you know what I mean? Those guys, Rasquame. So we were kind of starting to put out, you know, Ruckus is, I can't remember exactly the orders, but Ruckus had Let It Go, Yogi had Why Must You, Moorish Delta 7 we had stuff with. So we were just regularly servicing One Extra, 279 at Choice. Westwood wasn't really supporting, so we didn't really have that Radio 1 thing. But we were just pushing that stuff, and between that stuff and the US stuff, especially on One Extra, we went for a good few years where we had stuff on the playlist like every week. So they were really kind of supporting our music.
Were you independent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no label behind it. The Bomb thing, that stopped there. I'm trying to think around that time if anyone had anything on a label. I don't think so. And then I kind of met Skinny. So we were talking a little bit, and then he wanted to work. So we recorded some stuff, some of the singles with him. He got locked up, so that didn't happen. Then he came out. So he was on Talking Loud. And I think we recorded I'll Be Surprised and No Big Thing and Fuck the Hook. And then he got locked up. When he came out, Talking Loud had dropped him, but he got picked up by Low Life, Brain Tax. But they had to re-record the songs, so we went in and relayed them. And then that came out, and that was kind of, the wave broke then. So basically UK hip hop went from being just us in the scene to being like white kids in uni were into it all of a sudden. It became this cool, so you had like, you know, your Fire Life Cyphers and Roots Maneuver and all those guys, you know, around the same time we were doing Off the Hook.
Yeah.
It became a thing that wasn't just you were black and from the hood, so you was into hip hop. I guess people were listening to hip hop way before then, but there was no collective space, so you didn't have things like Kung Fu or Off the Hook or those type of things. And all of a sudden it was like you could go to a hip hop night and you could have, you know, kind of white kids that were into the culture, and they could be there and they weren't going to get robbed. And do you know what I mean? It was like it just became bigger, and Radio 1 started playing bits. So Skinny's stuff came out on Low Life and no one knew it was going to blow. Like it was just another, at the time it was still kind of, but it was just the right time, and it was really good, and he was an interesting guy. You know, that showbiz thing, not because he was showbiz, just because he was, you know, character, do you know what I mean? So it just, the stars aligned, and his stuff ended up on daytime Radio 1. Low Life had no idea it was going, they weren't prepared at all.
Yeah.
And that album ended up charting. It was like, and actually if Low Life had its stuff together and could have delivered, that album probably would have been a top 10, top 20 album. But he just didn't have the product to put in the stores into, he didn't have the infrastructure there to do it. But that was like daytime Radio 1. And then all of a sudden, you know, we've got Yogi, Why Must You, and there's like labels trying to sign that, and da-da-da. So there was just, and those times, so we were pressing up our own stuff. We'd record our own albums in-house, sometimes in studio, sometimes in the bedroom, but with reasonable equipment. And then we'd press stuff up, and, you know, you'd sell 2,000-3,000 copies of stuff, which was decent. So you were making a little bit of money. You were getting paid a couple £100 to do shows. So there's a bit of money coming in, but you were spending most of it. I was starting to get some remix work and production fees for doing stuff for other people, so I was getting little bits. So at that point, it became a business, as in I could pay the rent with it.
Did you still have the same love for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I became influenced for the first time by what's going on in the scene. So prior to that, I was just like, I was listening to records going, these guys are amazing. I just want to do this. And I was trying to do that and kind of doing it wrong. So therefore I had my own sound. Do you know what I mean? Whereas by the time UK hip hop became big, I was like, what is getting airplay within my lane? What stuff has done well and what hasn't? So for instance, I didn't make Let It Go thinking it was going to be a big track, but when it was a big track, I was like, I need some more stuff like Let It Go. So it was what was going on in the business started to influence what I was doing a little bit, which, and I don't think is a good thing, but it's like, you know, because I was like, I'm on the cut. There's always artists that are bigger than you. So I was like, I could see what, say, Dizzy Rascal was doing. I was like, I want to be at that level. Or I was like, I want to get placements on the next Raekwon album or the next Ghostface album and blah, blah, blah. And those things that I was kind of, so Raekwon had picked 2 tracks from me at that point. I'd met his manager on a trip out to the States and, you know, he wanted to work on some stuff. So I was kind of on the cusp of, on the edge of lots of stuff. And in this country, I was probably one of the biggest UK hip hop producers. So like there was, you know, anything that was going on, I was kind of at the forefront of, you know, I was kind of connected to. It wasn't like there was anything untouchable here. And in America, it felt like I was on the edge. I could go to certain parties, meet certain people, you know what I mean? Get certain meetings.
Yeah, and then you did that remix for that Amy girl.
Yeah, Amy somebody, Winhouse or something.
Something like that. Yeah, how did that come about?
So that came about because the guy that worked promo on Skinny's album is a guy called Harvey. He's from Manchester originally, I think, Manchester or Leeds. And he had a promo company called Zonked. And he'd been brought in to work the radio promo on Skinny's, and he'd seen how well it had done. So they'd done it was actually Mark Ronson's album version, and it was cover versions. And Mark's obviously worked on Amy's album, so he brought Amy in to do the Valerie cover, right? And because they knew Amy was starting to blow up, so because they knew it was going to be a really big single, they wanted loads of different remixes. So Sony was a label, they're going to edge the bet, so they're not just going to put it out, they're going to have a dance mix and a dubstep mix and a trance mix, so that every different, you know, type of genre, every different DJ is playing that track, so the track itself ends up being massive. And they had all the mixes done, and they'd gone to all the local London guys, as they always do, for all of those mixes, and paid them a couple of grand, do the mix. They needed a hip-hop mix. So they went to Harvey and they said, we need someone to do the hip-hop mix. He's got to turn it around quick. He's got to be cheap. He's got to be reliable. And he goes, Baby J. So he came to me and says, Jay, there's this thing. Absolutely, yeah, I want to do it. Because I'm like, I know people that are into black music, really like Amy Winehouse, but they've never really heard her. Like, she's never really done anything with, and this time I don't think she'd done the Nas and the Ghostface stuff. So I was like, she's not done anything hip hop yet, or reggae yet. And if people heard Amy over a reggae thing or a hip hop thing, because, you know, I'm growing up around that music because I'm from the UK, I'm like, they would lose their minds in this country, right? So I'm like, I want to do that. So I already knew what I wanted to do straight away. So we got paid the fee, and all I've got to do is do the remix, send the remix back in, and that's it. And I'm like, this is a massive opportunity, because at the time, you know, like, my name's ringing bells, I'm doing really well, especially over here. And I'm like, this is Amy Winehouse, like this, you know, this is a massive opportunity. So I knew straight away what to do with the track. I was like, it's got to have a reggae feel, it's got to put rappers on it. So I said to Sony, do you want one with rappers on, or do you just want, they were like, nah, just a remix, right? And I'm like, hell no. So I rang up, I was like, who's reliable? So I rang Malik, Ruckus, Preacher, and Wariko. Alex Blood wasn't in the I love him, but he wasn't in the first list. And because Wariko was hot in Nottingham at the time, and everyone was like, I was like, listen, I've got this call, you're only going to get a change out of it because there's next to no money. In fact, I don't even know whether I actually offered him any money. I was like, you need to be in the studio tonight. You need to write your verse tonight, because I've got to hand this in a couple of days. And you know, they might not even use it, because Sony have said they don't want a version with rappers on, but I'm going to try and force their hand and give them one anyway. Malik was just like, yes, I'll be there. Preacher, yes, I'll be there. Rook's like, yes, I'll be there. Warika was like, I don't know, man. No money. I'm not sure, because yeah, it might burn me if it does something. You haven't paid me. Like, bro, it's your shout. No pressure. He's like, nah, I'm going to leave it, but thanks though. I've spoke to him since then, years later. He's like, yeah, I regret that so much, because that track ended up being so big. So then I went to Alex, who actually has probably got my favourite verse on the thing. And he's like, yeah, I'm in. So those guys all got in the studio. I'm still making the beat at this point. I've got my idea, because I can always hear it first in my head, right? So I know what I want to do. I'd started building it. Those guys came through, penned the thing, did the mix, then did the mix with the rappers on. Everyone smashed it. So then I go back to Sony and I'm like, oh, I've done the version, but I've done a version with rappers on. And they were like, oh, okay, well, we just need our version. At that point, I'm going to get my chat. I don't need to do any more work. But I was like, look, I know a few hip hop DJs, underground guys that will probably like the version with the rappers on. Is it cool if I send the hip hop version out just to these underground pirate radio DJs and stuff? And they were like, yeah, I suppose it'd be fine if you want to send it to your friends, like this, like whatever, small little boy, we don't care. So what we did is we pressed up these CDs, right? It was a yellow with big black, you've probably seen it at the time, big black bold thing, and it said, Amy Winehouse, Valerie, Baby J remix. Mark Ronson's name was small underneath. And then I put the Sony logo on it, my logo, and my manager, Thad, his logo too, right? So it looked like it was a Sony release. And the version just had the version with the rappers, then the version without, then the instrumental. That was it. And we pressed up like 5,000 of these CDs, yeah. And mailed them to every DJ. And this time, we know every DJ, we're connected. We've got links. And Thad, me and him had a radio promo company, so we used to get paid to promo other artists. So we're doing this day in, day out. We know every DJ around the country, right? So we mailed out hundreds of these things, emailed out hundreds of these things, went around every radio, giving them out, every event, giving them out. We swamped the music industry with them, right? By that weekend, yeah, this track with the rappers on is getting rinsed on every radio station. The only one that's playing Ronson's version is Radio 1. Everyone else, One Extra, mine's on the A-list. Galaxy, Choice, mine's on the A-list. Kiss, mine's on the A-list. So they're all playing our version of the song. The only person that's playing Ronson's version is What's It? And it's Carnival weekend. This happened during the week. Carnival, that was one of the biggest tracks at Carnival. That track was massive. And Ronson, he knew, so he was like, so he's rung me and he's like, yo, I really like the mix, man. It's like a couple of things I want you to change. He's like, and he goes, yo, thank you. Like, the track's been really big at Carnival. That's down to your version. Because I got Amy Winehouse, black people love her music, but she's on a reggae hip hop track now. Do you know what I mean? So that was massive. And that's it. That's all I have to. Then Sony's panicking, going, where's this version from? Blah, 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 blah. So then Ireland have got involved and gone, we're going to do a cease and desist. We didn't know about this track. We haven't even heard it. No one got our permission. Da, 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 da. Then Darkers, who was Amy's A&R, he was like, hold on. This track's doing really well. And it's actually dope. So everyone just chill. So everyone back down. My manager's talking to people. And then we go to them, look. So Sony's ringing us like, what the hell's going on? Da, da, da. I was like, I don't know. I just sent it to a couple of DJs. They must have sent it around, blah, blah, blah. So that died down. Then he started doing really well. So they were like, oh, okay, actually, this is a good thing. I was like, can we do a video for it? And they were like, well, I don't know, can Mark shoot in his video? And da-da-da-da-da. So it's all set. And I was like, look, let me do a video. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. But it's just like for a couple of underground stations we know where they're into the hip hop stuff, just one with the rappers on. And they were like, okay. So we basically got Jimmy Knott, who we had the video company with at the time. He went and shot the video. And he did this thing where we got footage of Amy Winehouse singing, and because it was the wrong song she was singing, we couldn't do like a close-up. We found some footage of her holding a mic, so you can't really tell what she's singing. So we did it as we had this idea to do it as like a pixely poster thing, so you couldn't really tell that she wasn't singing the right song. And then we got all the rappers and did the same thing with him, and I was going around putting up the posters. So Amy Winehouse is in our video, because we're obviously not going to get Amy Winehouse in a video. We're not even meant to be doing this video. So we did this video, best one we could do, and then went to Sony, and I emailed them a link to the video, and I said, we've done the video, let me know if you don't want me to use it. I gave them like 6 hours to reply to that email. Didn't hear anything because they don't care about me. So we sent that video to everyone, MTV Base, The Box, and we know all these people. We sent it everywhere, we put it online. Next thing you know, the video's on all the playlists. Our video's getting twice. Amy Winehouse didn't turn up to his video because she's obviously in problems at that point. So we got Amy Winehouse on our video, the official video hasn't. Our video is getting twice as many plays as Mark's. Again, the big TV stations, they're using Mark's, but everyone else is playing ours. Ours was massive. So that track, and then Sony ring up, what the hell's going on? I have no idea how they got the video, I don't know, blah, blah. But we just know this is too big, and we're hip hop, we're gonna have to take our opportunities. So then they were like, that died down a bit. Then Mark's about to do the tour. So we were like, Mark's coming over to do the tour. I was like, oh, I'd really like to go to one of the dates. And they were like, oh, his first gig's in Manchester. We're gonna put you on the guest list and you can go and meet him. I was like, cool. So I went down there, went to meet him backstage, met Mark. It's the first time I've met Mark. And he's like, yeah, man. He was like, thank you so much for, the remix. It's really helped the song. I said, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I said, yo, it'd be dope to get the guys on one of the shows to, do their, to do the remix. It'd be like, because the track's doing so well. And he was like, yeah, that'd be cool, man. I was like, well, when's your next show? And he's like, we're in Birmingham. I was like, that's crazy. All the guys are from Birmingham. Not true. 2 of them from Birmingham, right? And I was like, that'd be great. That's their hometown. Loads of people, it'd be nuts. He'd be like, okay, we should do that. I was like, oh, how do we set that up? He was like, speak to John, the tour manager, and he'll arrange for you to come down to the next show. So I went to see the John. This guy used to TM for like Rolling Stones and stuff. He's like old white guy. Didn't like me from day one. He's like, who's this flipping scrote from Derby? So I'm like, John, Mark says he wants on the time. Okay, come down for this time. This is the address. I ring the guys. I said, we're doing this gig. Everyone has to drop what they were doing. We all bowl down there. That day, because it was the next day, right? We got matching T-shirts done with the logo on and everyone's name in some place in town where you get a T-shirt printed on the day. So we all turn up in these Baby J T-shirts with everyone's name on over the top of the thing, Ruckus Preacher, blah, blah, blah. And then basically we rehearse it with the band. And then the song, so the way his stage show works is they go on and do the stage show, and every song, because none of the big stars are there, apart from when we did Wireless and stuff, it's just, they have this girl Towie, an amazing singer, and Daniel Merriweather, and they sing all the songs. So you basically got the same band, same artist throughout the whole set. When we do the Valerie track, all of a sudden they do start with the normal track, then they go remix, switch it up into our version. We all come running out on stage, matching T-shirts, jumping about, going crazy. And just because it's visually different and you've been watching the same people on stage for 30 minutes, these guys come on and start going crazy. It's like, it's hype, it's like one of the most exciting point. Whether you like that version or not, plus it's one of the biggest tracks, like everyone went crazy. So it went down really, really well. So afterwards I said to Mark, yo, that was really good. Like the people loved it. He was like, yeah, it was really good. I was like, we should do that at some of the other shows. He was like, yeah, that'd be dope. We should do that. So then I went to see John. I was like, John, Mark says he wants to on the rest of the tour. Mark didn't say there's a tour. And he was like, okay, the next day it's here. So I said to the guys, I was like, we're on the tour. Like the tour manager doesn't want it there. Mark hasn't given his permission, but what I've got us on the tour. We're just gonna have to ride and do it. So we paid for us to follow them round. They're in a tour bus. There's me in my car driving us lot around the country after their tour bus doing these shows, sorting out our own accommodation, own transport, own food, no pay, nothing. Again, I got like a couple of grand for doing that remix. I've already paid to do a video, paid to do all the promo CDs. Now I'm paying for us to be on tour. But it's just too much of an opportunity to miss.
Yeah.
So we did the whole tour with them. It went really well. Do you know what I mean? Other opportunity, we got other remix work, and everyone's career got pushed a bit. And then when Jay-Z did his tour with Beyonce, he asked Mark Ronson to be the support. And Mark's like, knows everyone and da-da-da. And because it's a hip hop thing, Mark called us and Wiley, because Wiley had wearing my Rolex at the time. So we did the Jay-Z tour as well, which we did get paid. Well, I think we got expenses for. Do you know what I mean? But the point is that we could have just handed in the remix, but we took that and went all the way Derby with it, all the way hip hop with it, and just made it into the biggest thing possible. And that created so many opportunities, I think, for everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
got loads of other remix work and production work stuff back of that.
That's amazing.
Apologies for the slightly blunt ending there. We just realised that Jay had to be somewhere. So make sure you tune in for part 2. Hope you enjoyed that. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk.
Oh, that was nice.